It was a quiet morning in the vast, silent mansion of Victor Langston, a billionaire known for his heart of steel and his unbreakable pride. The first golden light of dawn poured through the tall French windows, stretching across the polished marble floors and making the grand chandeliers glitter like sleeping giants. These silent, expensive things were witnesses to a man who had everything in the world, except for a moment of peace. Victor had built his massive empire from nothing, gathering wealth that spanned entire continents, but in the process, he had forgotten the simple warmth of a genuine smile. His entire world was constructed from contracts, strict rules, and one core belief: trust no one. But on this particular morning, as he lay perfectly still on a long couch, pretending to be asleep, his goal wasn't about business. It was a test. A carefully designed trap meant to reveal the truth about a girl who was far too quiet for his liking. Her name was Clara, the new maid. She was shy, spoke in a soft voice, and seemed to move through the mansion like a ghost, almost invisible within the busy, daily rhythm of the staff. There was something about her that made him uneasy. Perhaps it was her constant silence. Perhaps it was the gentle way she looked at his paralyzed mother, with a quiet sympathy that felt out of place in his cold home. Or maybe it was the fact that she never, ever looked him directly in the eye. That day had started just like any other. The air held the faint, sweet smell of lilies from the vases that were arranged by the maids every single morning, and the grand clock in the hall chimed 8 times. As Clara quietly entered the drawing room, she moved with incredible care, almost as if she was afraid to make a single sound that might disturb the silence. Her uniform was neat and clean, though he could see it was a little worn at the edges. Her hands trembled just slightly as she began her task of cleaning the small table right next to where Victor was pretending to sleep. On the polished, dark wood of the table lay a few crisp, new $100 bills that Victor had intentionally left scattered there. It was bait, a simple lure for temptation. He had been hearing rumors for weeks, small whispers among the staff that someone had been taking small amounts of money from different rooms. He didn't know who it was, but his sharp instincts told him to test the quietest one. He believed she was weak, shy enough to think she could slip a note or two into her pocket when no one was watching. Clara's eyes finally landed on the money, and for a long moment, her breath caught in her throat. Her hands, which had been dusting the surface, froze in midair. A soft breeze from a nearby open window brushed against her face, making her reflection shimmer faintly in the polished wood. For a heartbeat, Victor could almost feel her thoughts racing, a silent storm of decision. He kept his own breathing perfectly steady, his eyes closed, his body still, consumed with curiosity to see what she would do. He was sure she would take it. He was ready for the disappointment. But what happened next was so unexpected, it made his chest tighten in a way it hadn't for years. Clara did not pocket the bills. Instead, she slowly and carefully gathered the scattered notes. She didn't rush. She smoothed each one out, stacking them into a neat pile. With delicate fingers, she placed the small stack of money precisely in the center of the table, where it couldn't be missed. Then, she did something that began to chip away at the cold, tall walls around Victor's heart. She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small, crumpled envelope. It was sealed, and the paper looked old and worn around the edges from being handled many times. She hesitated for a second, her eyes glancing toward him, before placing it right beside the money. Her hand lingered over it, trembling more noticeably now, before she whispered words so soft and quiet that Victor couldn't possibly hear them. Then she stepped back, her eyes glistening with what looked like unshed tears, and quietly went back to dusting a nearby bookshelf, as if nothing had happened. Victor waited until the sound of her soft footsteps faded from the room before he finally allowed himself to move. He sat up, the silence of the room suddenly feeling heavy. He reached for the old envelope. His name was written on the front in simple, neat handwriting, for Mr. Langston. His fingers felt clumsy as he opened it. Inside were two things: a small folded piece of notepaper and a faded photograph. He unfolded the note first. It read, "Sir, I found this money yesterday under the couch while I was cleaning. I did not know who it belonged to, and I did not want to assume anything. I am leaving it here so it can be returned to its owner properly. Thank you for giving me this work. It means more to me than you could ever know. Clara." His eyes then fell to the photograph. It was of a young girl, maybe 10 years old, lying in a hospital bed. She was pale, but was holding a small teddy bear with a weak smile on her face. Victor turned the photo over. On the back, written in the same neat handwriting, were the words, "My little sister Anna. I am saving for her treatment." For the first time in decades, Victor felt something inside him shatter. The crushing weight of his own suspicion and distrust pressed down hard on his chest, making it difficult to breathe. He had set a trap for this girl, humiliated her in his own mind, fully expecting to find greed and dishonesty. Instead, he had found dignity and grace. He leaned back heavily in his chair, his eyes fixed on the picture of the sick little girl. He remembered his own sister, how she had once suffered from a terrible illness when he was a young man, too busy, too driven, too focused on chasing profits to truly be there for her. The memory, which he had buried under years of work and success, now clawed its way back into the light, raw and painful. Over the next few days, Victor watched Clara with new eyes. He watched her quietly, from a distance. She always arrived early for her shift, and always left late. She worked with a quiet dedication that clearly wasn't for show. He noticed how she would often stop by his mother's room. She would gently adjust the blanket on his mother's lap, or read softly to her from an old book of poems. His mother, who had been silent and expressionless for years, had started to smile again, a small but genuine smile that only appeared when that quiet girl was near. And through it all, Clara never once mentioned her sister. She never spoke of her struggle or her need for money. She simply worked, her head held high, grateful for the small opportunity she had been given. One evening, as heavy rain poured down outside and thunder rolled through the distant hills, Victor found himself pacing the long, empty halls, unable to sleep. He stopped outside the kitchen, drawn by a sliver of light from under the door. He peered in and saw Clara sitting alone at the large kitchen table, eating a simple piece of bread with a cup of tea. She was watching the lightning flash through the window, her expression a mixture of fear and wonder. It reminded him of how he used to watch storms as a child, back when his life was simple and his heart wasn't so guarded. Something about her innocence, her quiet purity in that moment, made him realize just how lost and empty his own life had become. The very next morning, Victor made a phone call to his personal accountant. He quietly arranged for a very large donation to be made under Clara's name to the hospital that specialized in the exact kind of pediatric care her sister needed. He made sure his own name was not on any of the forms. He wanted her to believe it was a miracle from a stranger, not an act of charity from her suspicious boss. But when the hospital called Clara that evening with the unbelievable news that her sister's entire treatment was now fully funded, she broke down, crying in the hallway. Victor watched her from the doorway of his study, hidden in the shadows. He listened as her sobs filled the vast, quiet mansion. They were not sounds of sadness, but sounds of overwhelming relief and joy. And as he listened, he felt something deep within him finally begin to heal. The next day, Clara came to work with eyes that were still swollen from crying, but she wore a smile brighter than any sunrise Victor had ever seen. She worked with a new lightness in her step, a joy that seemed to fill every dark corner of the grand house. She even hummed a soft tune as she moved from room to room. Victor couldn't keep it a secret any longer. He felt he had to tell her the truth. When he finally found the courage to confess it all, that he had pretended to be asleep that day to test her honesty, and that he was the one who had paid for her sister's medical care, Clara didn't say a single word at first. She simply looked at him, her eyes shining with fresh tears. Then she whispered a quiet, "Thank you." That simple phrase carried more genuine sincerity than all the praise he had ever received in his life from powerful people in boardrooms. In that single, quiet moment, Victor Langston finally understood that kindness wasn't a weakness to be exploited. It was the incredible strength to remain good and pure in a world that so often rewarded greed. He learned that trust could be born not from power and control, but from humility and seeing the good in others. From that day forward, the entire mansion began to change. The flowers in the vases seemed brighter. His mother laughed out loud again, a sound he hadn't heard in years, and the air itself seemed to carry a warmth that had been missing for far too long. Clara stayed on, not just as a maid, but as a cherished part of their lives, an unspoken, living reminder of the quiet, immense power of a good heart.